All right, what is happening? Anthony with Bleacher Bums Gaming, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. Every year, right before the holidays, I kind of have a tradition. One day during my work week prior to Christmas, I listen to Glory of Their Times, all 4 hours of it in its entirety, and of course, Glory of our Times probably at least one or two on the Mount Rushmore of Deadball era books. And, you could put other books up there, Stars of the Deadball era. Crazy '08 is definitely another book about the Deadball era that belongs on that Mount Rushmore. But Glory of Their Times was kind of the first one. And what makes it probably my favorite still is that in addition to the book, which was an excellent, I guess, capture of the dead ball era, actually in the words of the players who played them, because Lawrence Ritter, the author of the book, was able to interview every single player that appears in the book and get their stories verbatim. And the best part of that is he taped every single interview, and it's now available as an audiobook. And it's not just the author or an actor reading transcripts from the interviews. It is the actual tape recordings of the players themselves. So very cool. It's really one of the treasures of baseball history, in my opinion, because so many of these guys were deceased, and he did miss. Ty Cobb died a few years before he started writing the book. Would have been awesome to have him in there. Walter Johnson did as well. Obviously, Christy Mathewson died extremely young, at the age of 43, after the unfortunate incident where he was gassed training for when he enlisted, I should say, for World War One. So a lot of players still were alive, though, in 1966. Sam Crawford, one of Cobb's teammates, of course, and Hans Lopert, very well-respected third baseman. Jimmy Austin, who is probably one of the key figures in one of the most, if not the most famous dead ball era pitcher, where Ty Cobb was sliding into third base, big cloud of dust, and you see Jimmy Austin, who was then third baseman for the St. Louis Browns, backside. And obviously still the focus of the pitcher is Cobb, but still he's part of an iconic pitcher. So Rube Marquardt is in there, Lefty O'Doul. He even got to interview Smokey Joe Wood. So it's really just a treasure trove, of players from that era. And the player that we're going to listen to today, and let me back up. So the purpose of this video is to listen to one of the interviews of the players as it was conducted and taped, and kind of react and comment on that. And I picked this particular player just because I think it's a really cool story, and we'll get into that as he starts talking. But it's going to be Davy Jones, who, of course, was in that very famous outfield for the Detroit Tigers alongside Ty Cobb and Sam Crawford. And, unfortunately, been in the outfield with those two guys as kind of being like Zeppo of the Marx Brothers. Harpo, Groucho, and Chico got all the acclaim, but Zeppo was part of the group too. And Davy Jones was a very competent player in his own right, and a big part of those Detroit teams that did so well in terms of, their 3-year run from 1907 to 1909. So without further ado, let's get into that, and we're going to do some fact checking on this too. And sometimes with these stories, many of these stories occurred, 50 to 60 years prior to when Lawrence Ritter actually recorded them. So that's a long time for a player, especially when you're in 60s, 70s. I think most of these guys actually were well into their 70s. and you obviously lose some of the recollection. But so I didn't really want to get too deep into fact checking, but there is one story that Davy Jones tells that I definitely did want to investigate. So we're going to do that with the tools available to us. So without further ado, Davy Jones, glory of their times.
Davy Jones was a Wisconsin boy who started in the big leagues in 1901, shortly after he graduated from Dixon College. He played in the majors for 14 years, including 3 World Series with the Detroit Tigers, and in those years he was a member of one of the greatest outfields of all time, Ty Cobb in right field, Sam Crawford in center field, and Davy Jones in left field. I interviewed Davy in Milwaukee. Davy had made a considerable fortune as a druggist.
Now, let's just reference on, he mentioned that as one of the greatest outfields of all time. Again, I would really have to agree. 2 Hall of Famers, Crawford and Cobb. And Jones was, again, a very competent hitter. I would say a very capable 270 plus hitter, which was very good at that point in time, of course, Deadball era. And was a good table setter for that franchise. So anyway, let's get back to that. And the story he's about to tell now is really, to me, one of the reasons I picked him, because it's the non-baseball part where Jones was not able to pursue, I guess you can say, relationship that he really wanted. But how things kind of came full circle for him. And again, as you'll hear, very, very successful outside of baseball. And just a real pleasure to listen to. So let's get back to that.
The Joneses, Margaret and Davy, lived in a very nice apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. They had only been married about 15 years. They had gone together as sweethearts when they were in high school. But Davy wanted to be a ball player, and Margaret's father refused to let her see him anymore when he started in baseball, because ball players were no good in those days. So they broke up, and later in life, when they were both in their 60s, their respective spouses died. Margaret's husband, the doctor, died. Davy's wife died, and they met each other quite by accident again in their 60s, and they got married. He was a sweetie pie who was always looking on the light side of things. Davy was a jolly elf. The baseball player.
So that's just the really cool part of the story. So imagine, and again, if you were a father now, and just say your daughter came home and wanted to introduce you to her boyfriend, hopefully actually fiance, and he was just getting out of college and starting his minor league career. His name was Aaron Judge. You would probably not be so harsh in your judgment. But again, baseball players around this time, the game was still regarded by a large portion of society as being, I guess, commandeered by thugs and cutthroats. And not a lot of college-educated men in the game at the time. Definitely a few. And obviously probably the most renowned from that time period was Christy Mathewson, Columbia degree, and by all means a genteel and very, very intelligent and articulate. But Davy Jones unfortunately felt the wrath of the stigma that surrounded many baseball players back then. And the cool thing, though, is they were able to reconnect later in life. And when you think about that, what are the odds of that? I mean, in their 60s, meaning that you go back to high school, that's a good, easily 50 years, 45 to 50 years that they were forced to stop seeing each other, and been able to reconnect then, and both with a large degree of success in life, and live out their final years together is just a pretty cool side note to this. So let's get back to the interview.
You're saying have so much status like they do now? Was it as respectable a thing to do
No.
as it is now?
I'll tell you a funny story about that. Margaret and I were sweethearts in high school. Our family were very religious. And when I got into baseball, they wouldn't let her have anything to do with me. because back in those days, you know, a ball player was just a bum too lazy to work. And for that reason, we kind of broke up.
What did your mother and father think when you, after going to law school and everything, went and started playing professional baseball? Was that okay
Well,
with them?
I'll tell you, it was the money factor more than anything else. You see, when I signed with this Milwaukee club, I got a bonus of $500, which if I worked on the railroad, I had to work 6 months.
You jumped to Milwaukee.
I jumped to Milwaukee. And of course, they were jumping back and forth, and that the contract didn't mean anything. No, you see, Milwaukee was in the American League at that time, and that was an outlaw league.
The American League was just forming then.
That's right, that was their first year, 1901. I joined the team in Chicago on a Saturday, and it rained. There was a little Irishman that drove us out, and he had a bell, like a fire bell, like on his bus, and streetcars and everything else had to stop for him. You'd go along, you know, he'd be ringing that bell and go through funeral processions and everything, you know. He didn't care, he just wanted to get out that park. We sat in the grandstand, and the first time I saw Comiskey, he was down near second base with his pants rolled up and a couple of sponges and a pail, soaking up water around the bases to try to get the diamond in shape to play. That was the first time I saw Charlie Comiskey. Did he start?
So let's just comment on that. The owner of a Major League Baseball club, and someone who really spent most of his life in the game, because Comiskey was a player back in the 1800s as well. So imagine going to the ballpark now and seeing Hal Steinbrenner down in Yankee Stadium with a sponge soaking up water from the infield so that you could get a game in. And these are just some of the little tidbits in this book. And you know, again, it's one thing to read that, but when you actually hear Davy Jones talking about that, the first encounter he had with Charlie Comiskey, it just really brings a special flavor to it, and to me paints a picture of how the game was back then. And you know, they didn't have the finely manicured fields, and I'll talk maybe later in the video about Exposition Park in Pittsburgh, which was right on the Allegheny River, and of course Pittsburgh at the time. Tons of factories and a very dirty, polluted city. But anyway, I just kind of wanted to stop and comment on that because, again, just tells you. And we'll get to another part here where Davy Jones talks about how after the ball game, when he opened his his pharmacy, and as Larry Ritter mentioned in the intro to this interview, a very, very successful career in the pharmaceutical industry. But Davy Jones would go over to his store, which was close to the stadium, and actually serve customers. You know, and again, picture going to a drugstore, a Walgreens. You know, obviously drugstores don't have soda fountains anymore, but you know, going to say a Panda Express that maybe Bryce Harper has franchised, and Bryce Harper is behind the counter serving up chow mein to you. You know, never going to happen now. So again, just another cool touch from that time. So here we go.
Started from nothing, you know, and just just through baseball. Well, anyhow, it rained so that we couldn't play that day. So the next day we played a doubleheader, and the first game we played was probably one of the greatest games I ever played in my life. You see, I'd never seen a Major League park. I'd never seen a Major League game. Here they come and take me right from the minor league and put the uniform on and put me leading off for the team.
Were you nervous?
No, it doesn't seem to be. And the second time at bat, I made the longest hit I ever made on the ballpark, over the right field fence. There was only one other ball ever hit over that right field fence. Of course, the fences were farther away than they were half a mile, seemed like.
The ball was dead.
The ball was dead. And I made 3 catches in the outfield. That every time I come in from the outfield, the crowd just stood up in the grandstand and cheered me. And from then on, you know, I never was a bench warmer, only just when I was hurt or something. 15 years.
Besides being a lawyer, are you a pharmacist too?
Yes. I bought the store in 1910. Of course, a lot of the fans, you know, as soon as the game was over, they'd go down to the drugstore and have me draw them a soda, you know. That was great fun for a lot of them. Sometimes you couldn't get in the drugstore.
I
The
should think
crowd.
so.
So my business was very fine.
What did you name the drugstore?
Davy Jones Drug Company.
Yeah, that's what I thought you would.
So even back then, the power of marketing, just like a lot of celebrities do now, like Dr. Dre with Dre Beats and whatnot. Stroke of genius, attach your name to the drugstore, and that will definitely bring in more clientele, especially baseball fans. So.
I had 5 stores at one time.
Really?
I made as much money or more than I did playing baseball.
And you went up in 1906 and then
1906.
won 3 pennants, 7, 8, 9.
Mhm.
How did the Detroit team treat you as you came up to them now?
They treated me fine, but they didn't treat Cobb very good.
Why did they treat Cobb so badly?
Well, I'll tell you, Cobb,
This was a common theme. Crawford talks about it as well on his interview. And one of the other players, God, the name, I want to say it's Austin, maybe not, but, it's pretty common with these guys. And it's definitely one fact that really doesn't need to be checked if you go back and read any contemporary account of when Cobb played. Just not a great player, not very well liked by friend or foe.
he asked for it. You know, Cobb had a rotten disposition. Cobb and Crawford and I had 7, 8, and 9 lower berths. I stood there and Cobb took a gun out of his pocket, put it under his pillow. Well, I thought, God, that's funny. The guy carrying a gun around with him, ball club, never saw it. I said, what are you carrying that gun for? He says, well, some of these damn Yankees get fresh with me, I'll show them why I'm carrying this gun. And there was 2 or 3 other players stood there, and heard it. They said, well, God, that guy carrying a gun around with him, what the hell? And he was everything for Cobb. He didn't care for anybody but Ty himself. He didn't care anything about his mother, his father. Well, I don't know about his father. You knew that Cobb's mother murdered his father, didn't you?
No.
When we were down there in 1906, Cobb went up to his little town, for the trial. She was arrested for murder. The way the story goes, that he was kind of suspicious of her. And he's supposed to go away on a trip. He sneaked back, and he was looking through the window and she shot him. She thought he was a burglar. That was the excuse, anyhow. But she was acquitted on that fact. And his life was kind of tragic, thing of that kind, It kind of hangs on a fellow.
So that's one good account that's pretty much spot on, and surprised that the author indicated he did not know about that. You would think in researching this that Lawrence Ritter would have known. I mean, that was a sensational. Again, Cobb was just starting out, so maybe not as much in terms of the major league spectrum, but a huge story in his native Georgia, where his father was fairly well respected. And the story that Davy Jones gives there is the generally accepted story. If you read some of the books about Ty Cobb, and probably one of the better ones is A Terrible Beauty, which I have, it talks about, there was a lot of innuendo, and one thing that was kind of, widely suspected, and, could be true, could be not, is that when the elder Cobb did return home, and he did have suspicions that his wife was having an affair, and he returned home to catch her. And one of the rumors or suspicions of the time was that it actually wasn't her that shot her husband. It was her lover, who happened to be there at the time he returned home, and then, of course, vacated the premises, and then the whole story about the burglar. But, regardless, it tells a lot about why Ty Cobb was the way he was. Didn't have a super close relationship with his father by all accounts, but kind of in fitting with the theme of Ty Cobb's life, He really lived to get his father's approval. Ty Cobb competed in everything, including, for his father's love, allegedly, and that definitely would have an impact on anybody. And with Cobb, the way his disposition was, probably took that to a next level. So
Cobb always says that during that spring, the regulars treated him very badly. That they broke his bats, that they threw water
I'll
on
tell
him.
you, they did a lot of dirty tricks on it, but I'll tell you, when we were training there at Augusta, we used to leave our glove and our shoes out at the little room there, right adjoining the groundkeeper's home. And we went out there one day, and Cobb missed his shoes and glove. I think that Killian or some of those guys hit him.
Were they kidding around with him, or were they seriously?
Well, they didn't like him. So, well, anyhow, and we went out there, and he couldn't find his shoes or glove, but he accused the groundkeeper's wife, the colored woman, of stealing them. He called her a lot of names that he shouldn't have. Charlie Schmidt spoke up, and he says, "You're no man." He says, "You wouldn't call any woman named like that, even if she is colored." Cobb says, "Not your damn business." But he says, "I'm making my business." So they went to it. Cobb had scratched Smitty's face and it bled a little. So the papers came out and said Cobb trimmed Smitty and won this fight. He couldn't lick one side of Smitty, his Smitty was a bully in the wrong place. So Smitty, he says, when he read this piece in the paper, he says, "Well, I'll show these guys down south that he can't lick me." He says, "Before we get out of the south, I'll show that guy." So nothing was said until we got over to Meridian, Mississippi. We played an exhibition game there on our way around north. So Smitty walked over to Cobb. Smitty said, "Damn it, I'm going to give you that licking, I promise you." So they squared off. Cobb threw his glove down, and Smitty hit him over the left eye, and he knocked him about 10 feet square on his back. And Smitty just hit him this once. So Cobb got up on his knees. Cobb held up his hands. He says, "I got enough."
Cobb is always reputed to be a man who made himself a great ball player by heart.
So the story with Bob Schmidt is well recited, and Schmidt was by all accounts, and they mentioned it here, a beast of a man, especially for that time when there wasn't so much physical training in terms of strength training and whatnot. And Cobb was a very capable scrapper, obviously by the amount of scraps he got into and allegedly won. Schmidt, however, was just in a different league. And, the story too, Jones kind of makes it verbal, but there's also stories that he actually, meaning Cobb, put his hands on the groundskeeper's wife. And, again, where this occurred during spring training down in Augusta, and Cobb had played for the Augusta Travelers prior to being called up to Detroit, or purchased by Detroit, I should say. And they were probably going to protect Cobb and make him look better because he was a Southerner. And, there was still some healing to do in the country at that point in time. As you go back and reference Cobb's comments about carrying a gun if any of these damn Yankees got fresh with him. So yeah, that's that is definitely one story that has been recounted and definitely I would say verifiable in terms of the Cobb Schmidt incident and what led to it.
Hard work.
That's wrong. Absolutely wrong. He didn't. He would practice less, and he worked less than any ball player on our ball club. It was natural with Cobb. Cobb was a natural ball player, and he was looking to take every advantage. As far as condition is concerned, that guy didn't know what it was to train. When we go in morning practice, and we'd come in, and once in a while we'd eat a sandwich or something like that. You know what he would eat? A whole apple pie and drink 3-4 bottles of Coca-Cola. That would be his lunch. I know that one day he came in late. We'd had our practice, fielding practice, and Moriarty and I were in the clubhouse.
So real quick on that, Cobb made a fortune investing in Coca-Cola, and you can see he developed that taste for that fairly early. The other thing that's interesting there to me is Jones is one of the I guess, few people that really disputes the fact that Cobb kind of made himself through work ethic, and there's no doubt about he was driven. He didn't like to lose at anything, and part of that mental makeup is what made him successful as a ball player. But I think it's interesting that Jones is practically saying he probably even could have been better than he was if he would have just taken care of himself and worked. So that's something you do not hear a lot about Cobb, and I thought it was interesting that Jones brought that up.
And as we were in there, Cobb came in. He had been there to practice now. So Moriarty made the remark. He says, it's nice to be a star. He said, you don't have to come to practice, the rest of us. One thing led to another, and finally they went at it. Boy, and I jumped in between them, and one of them hit me back at the side of the head and pretty knocked me out. Really got the worst of it.
Another fight with Cobb.
Well, that's all it was to it. I guess I was the loser. He didn't have anybody on his side at all. I don't think he even had his wife on his side for that. I don't know. He a very immoral guy, chasing the women, God, he wouldn't care who they were. Boy, he had an awful reputation with the women there. We were in the Euclid Hotel in Cleveland, and there was two young girls, two sisters, there visiting. They wanted to stop there because they wanted to meet the ball players. Pretty good-looking girls, pretty healthy-looking girls, about 21, 22, something around there. Calm, I guess, men. Of course, the house detective was wise to these fellows, going up to this girl's room. So he was up there on the hall, watching. Finally, Cobb went up. This detective was asking where he was going. Your room isn't on this floor. Cobb says, it's not your damn business. They got in an argument, and they finally got into a fight. Cobb took out the knife and cut the guy 2-3 places. Oh, he cut him bad. The guy was in the hospital for about 3 weeks. He had a hard time getting out of that. Cost him about $10,000. Of course, we get a lot of calls, these hero worshippers, gals call up, want to make a date, a lot of letters and telegrams, everything like that, just like any ball player. And probably back in those days, I was a fairly good-looking guy, too, and carried myself from the ball field. And kind of fascinated a lot of the gals, that come out and watch the players. Right, I get stacked with letters down there. I never paid any attention to them from high school girls. They'd see your picture on a tablet or something like that, that they'd like that picture and want to correspond with them. From all over the United States, even from Canada. I got them from Canada. I got a call at midnight. I just got into bed. I just got my pajamas on.
What kind of a manager?
So, again, one thing that people all say about baseball, which is true, you could recognize, football has changed dramatically since its infancy, as has basketball, and you apply that to many sports. Baseball, you could watch a game in 1908 and completely recognize it as a game you play today, minus, of course, the excessive home runs and strikeouts. But it's just interesting, that little tidbit he throws in about the extra opportunities for more that athletes, even back then, were afforded. So that's another thing that would definitely be recognizable back then as well as today with the ball players.
It was Huey Jennings. Was he a good manager?
Now, Jennings was drunk pretty all the time. He didn't even know what was going on in the ball field. He didn't know our signals. He'd come out there sometimes, he'd be in a stupor. And he'd raise Cain, and anybody did anything, he'd call them names, and although Jennings never did that but once to me, and I told him if he ever called me that again, I'd knock his block off. I chased him out of the clubhouse in Chicago without anything on, new.
What?
He was in the shower bath, and he made this remark about me, and I said, "You're a dirty bastard, you didn't call me that," and when I hit him, he started to run, and I after him, run out of the clubhouse. Bare naked. The language that he used to some of those ball players, Crawford was going to choke him one day on the bench, you know. He jumped on the Crawford for misjudging a ball. He said he misjudged it, but he didn't. Cobb was the only one that he never said anything to, because Cobb would have been like a cat, you know. He'd have jumped at him in a minute if he ever said anything to him. He never said a word to Cobb. He was afraid to.
How come they kept him as manager for so many
Well,
years?
because the team was successful. You see, he came there in 1907. They won 3 straight pennants. We had a team that every player on the club knew just as much about the game and what to do as the manager did.
Did you ever see Germany Schaefer steal first from second base?
I was on third base and scored the run. It happened.
Really? What was the occasion for something?
Well, here the score was a tie. 2 men out in the 9th inning. Cobb was up to bat. When the first ball was pitched, Schaefer let a yell out and he went to second to draw the throw from the catcher so I could score from third. But of course the catcher refused to throw it. Schaefer let a yell out of him and he tore back to first like a wild Indian.
From second?
From second, see? And he dove in at first, head first, you see, and nobody there, of course. And he did that, you know, to thinking that this pitcher would be confused and would throw the ball over there with nobody there to field it.
What happened?
But nothing. We were all amazed, you know, at the play. Even I was on third, you know. I didn't know what he was playing at the time. And of course the crowd and everybody yelling and everybody was confused. So the pitcher got in and the next ball they pitched, he stole second again. And this time the catcher threw to second, see, and I scored the winning run.
He stole second, and he stole back to first, and he stole second.
And he, when he come to the official score, he says, I'm entitled to 3 stolen bases and 1 attempt. But he was funny, all right, old boy. One day in Cleveland, there was a couple German comedians stopping there. And of course, Schaefer was always mixed up with that kind of gang anyhow. And as a matter of fact, he did get on the vaudeville stage one winter, you know. Schaefer was up in their room, and of course they had all their equipment, their false whiskers and so forth. Schaefer said, say, listen, he says, can I borrow those whiskers? I said, sure. So we went out to the ballpark, and the first time Schaefer went up to bat, he put his whiskers on. I was on first base, and then he followed me the batting room, and I was on first base, and everybody started to laugh and hoot. And of course, I didn't know that he had them there. Nobody else did. The umpire didn't know what they were laughing at because he couldn't see the whiskers on. Finally, when he got into the box, you know, of course, the umpire saw these whiskers on him. He said, Schaefer, go and take those whiskers off. He said, this is no comedy, this is a ball game. Well, he was always putting stunts like that. Yeah, he just kept life in the team all the time, doing something, you know.
The story coming up about Schaefer is the one we're going to fact check, but no way, of course, to really fact the stolen base story going back and forth between first and second has been repeated before, and you know, possible. I would think that was true. I don't know what would happen if a player tried to do that today, but you know, then I think that probably confused the umpires as much as anyone else on the team. So that story, because it has been told by multiple people, I would say is correct. And then the other thing I'd just say there is, I don't think I've ever heard anybody outside of this time period refer to facial hair as whiskers. And apparently that's what you called it back then, because the umpire told him to take his whiskers off. And yeah, in knowing, in research I've done and come across anecdotes about Germany Schaefer, I would totally believe that story too. But the one coming up is the one that we're going to check out and see if we can fact check it. So.
And cracking jokes, you know, he was really funny, naturally funny. We were playing in Chicago the first year I was with the team, in 1906. Red Donna, who was pitching for us, and Doc White was pitching for the White Sox.
Good pitcher.
Yeah, Doc was a good left-hand pitcher. Come the ninth inning, score was 2-1 in favor of the White Sox. A man on first, and the pitcher up turned to bat, who was Red Donohue, and one of the worst hitters in the league. Well, Red used to like to get up there and take his swings, anyhow. So Bill Armour, who was our manager at that time, asked Schaefer if he was all right. Schaefer's been out of the game for about a month, and Schaefer says, yeah, sure. He says, against Doc White, he says, I'd like to hit against him. Donohue was there swinging his club, ready to get up to bat. Schaefer said to Red, he says, manager wants me to hit for you. Red looked at him, he says, who the hell are you going to hit for me? He folded his arms and he sat there, mad on the one hand, because they took him out, put it in the pinch hitter for him. So Schaefer walked over in front of the grandstand, took off his cap, and he said, ladies and gentlemen, you are now looking at Herman Schaefer, better known as Herman the Great, the greatest pinch hitter in the world. He says, I'm going up there and I'm going to hit the ball in that left field bleachers and win this ball game. And finally turned around, he says, thank you. He walked up to the plate, and of course they all give him the raspberry, He never hit over 2 or 3 home runs in his life, So the second ball that Doc White pitched, he did just exactly what he said he was going to do. He hit it in the left field bleachers. Well, boy, oh boy, you ought to have seen him. He stood at the plate, until he saw the ball going into the bleachers, and he tore down at first as hard as he could run, and he slid into first head first. And he pulled off his cap and he said, Schaefer leads at the quarter. And he tore down to second and slid into second. He said, Schaefer leads at the half. When he slid into the plate, he turned around and he says, Schaefer wins by a nose. And he walked over in front of the grandstand and took off his cap and he says, ladies and gentlemen, he says, I want to thank you for your attention. Well, it was one of the funniest things I think that I ever saw in baseball. And of course, it's so unusual today, they think a guy was crazy if he did that. But in those days, you could pull stuff like that, and the crowd enjoyed it. He was still sitting there just like a stone image, see? His arm folded, sitting like that, so he came up to Red. He says, Red, he says, how'd you like that? Not a goddamn bit better than I'd have done myself. Well, the funny part of the whole thing was, when we went back to Detroit the next day, the first time Schaefer came up to bat, a fellow named Joss, Addie Joss, a big lanky fellow with a sidearm there, and Schaefer couldn't hit him with a paddle. Schaefer came up the first time, and of course everybody in the ground said, hooray, Schaefer, for winning the game the day before. Give him a great send-off. So he took 3 swings and struck out. The second time he came up to bat, of course it was still a hooray Schaefer, but not quite as much of an ovation as he got the first time. He struck out again. Third time he came up to bat, no commotion at all, no ovation. So we come to the fourth time at bat, Schaefer didn't want to get up to bat again. So Schaefer walks up to me and says, if you get on that base, he says, I'm going to bat you over. I looked at Schaefer, started laughing, and I did get on, see, and Schaefer had to get up the fourth time, see, after striking out 3 times. And of course the crowd then, take the bum out. I said, that's the baseball crowd, Take him out, take the bum out. Well, that shows you how quick a guy can turn from being a hero to a bum. And it's absolutely true, every word of it. No.
All right, there you go. So that great story. And again, a very apt comparison to fans, or cranks as they were back in that day, and how they are today as well. So this story was interesting to me. So this is one I wanted to fact check, and it was going to be easy because Germany's Schaefer hit 9 lifetime home runs, and Baseball Reference has a home run log. So you see that's up on the screen here. And June 24th, 1906, coming in as a pinch hitter against Doc White of the Chicago White Sox with 2 outs, he hit a 2-run home run. So that part of the story, absolutely true, and also the incredulous reaction of the pitcher, Red Donahoe. Again, Schaefer, 9 home runs in his career. Coming into this game, he had 2 career home runs, and the one prior to this was 10 months before, in August of 1905. So let's take a look at the box score of this game. All right, so again, that was indeed, Davy Jones recounted that exactly correct. That was a Germany Schaefer home run, a 2-out, 2-run home run in the top of the 9th. It was a game winner. Now, the White Sox still had that last chance to hit, but Schaefer did win the game, as he said. Pitching for the Detroit Tigers was Red Donahue, and he was taken out, so that's exactly right. Schaefer did pinch hit for Donahue, and Ed DeSeaver came in to get the win in the bottom of the 9th, and of course Doc White was a pitcher. So far we are on point. Now the second part of the story, so let's go to Detroit's next game, because he indicates that they went home to Detroit the next day, where he got his hero's welcome. So Detroit, the next game, playing against the Cleveland Naps, June 25th, 1906. It was at home. Cleveland a 3-1 winner. I hate these pop-ups. Addie Joss was the pitcher, beating Wild Bill Donovan in a very, again, apropos pitcher's duel for that time period. So, again, on point. So the only thing left on this story, he didn't really quite say if he struck out the 4th time against Joss, but let's see if he struck out 3 times. And, even at this point, the story absolutely has enough that matches for me to, I guess, rejoice in the fact that it literally is a true story. So Joss, a 3-1 winner the next day in Detroit. Davy Jones batting leadoff, Germany Schaefer batting second, and there you have it. 4 strikeouts against Joss. Actually, the only 4 strikeouts Joss recorded in the game. Well, I actually got 7, so I don't know why the others are not documented. But I just think it's, well, kind of cool and ironic that they do not document all of who Joss struck out, but they do have the 4 that were credited to Germany Schaefer. So is this something that the folks at Baseball Reference added after the fact, maybe based on this story? Who knows? But the cool part is whether it was manipulated through this interview or not. Like Davy Jones said at the end of that, and every word of it was true. So that's exactly how it happened. Schaefer, the 3rd home run of his career, the day before a game winner in Chicago, coming back to Detroit the next day against Addie Joss, the human pinwheel as he was known, struck out 4 times, and obviously Davy Jones did have a hit in that ball game. Actually, let's see if we can do the play-by-play here to see if he just again the story's true. I mean, everything matches what Jones said. So excellent recollection all that time later. Do they have play-by-play here for this game? They might not. And you know what? Why bother? Because again, everything came out exactly pretty much as Jones said. So cool story. We were able to fact check, and what makes it so much better is Schaefer was a character anyway and had such little power. 9 home runs in his entire career. So just cool to see that every piece of that story fell into place. So let's get back to the rest of Davy's interview.
You'd laugh at this because this is funny. And you would think that anything like this could happen in a major league game. We were playing a game in Pittsburgh, and we had a pitcher, a left-handed pitcher. The name was Jimmy St. Brain. This is when I was with the Cubs. Jimmy was a left-handed pitcher and a right-handed hitter. And he couldn't hit a foul off these pitchers, you know, the way he hit. The manager, Seeley, says, Jimmy, he says, why don't you turn around and hit left-handed? He says, you don't even make a foul hit right-handed. You can't hit right-handed. Turn around and hit left-handed. See what you can do. He was a good pitcher. He had a lot of stuff, and boy, at the match, you know, he was a mess. Well, anyhow, he turned around, hit left-handed. And darn if he didn't hit the ball. He hit it down to Wagner. And instead of run to first, he run to third. Now, you wouldn't think that could happen, but if I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't believe it either. Well, I asked Wagner after that. I said, well, when you saw that guy running to third, he says, what did you think when you went through? He says, I didn't know where to throw the ball. He had me all mixed up, too. We had dumb guys, crazy guys, and we had well-educated guys. I mean, we had a different assortment. You know, it's just like any walk of life. You take any profession. You take a bunch of, say, 50 lawyers, and you'll find all kinds of guys among them. Some are dumber than the hell, and others are smart. You know, doctors are the same way. Half of the doctors that are practicing today are just a lot of quacks. I get prescriptions from some of those doctors that I wouldn't even fill. There's a lot of them are dope fiends, but there are some fine guys and some good doctors, and I really depend on them a good deal.
Everybody does.
Yeah.
Can't help
It's
it.
just like ball players. You'll find good ones. Now you take Matheson, was a principal guy, smart as a whip. He was well-educated, Paul. High-class guy. Had a great pitcher. Boy, oh boy. One day in Chicago, I'll never forget it as long as I live, I was up to bat with 3 men on bases and 1 run to tie, and I never saw such pitching in all my life. You know, he had a nice curve, and then he had that fadeaway ball. That was his favorite. But of course, I was over the plate, you know, looking for that fadeaway. But you know that with 3 men on bases, that guy pitched me 5 curved balls on an inside square, and I couldn't do a thing with them but foul them. Every one of them. 5, one right after the other. And every one was a strike. I never saw such perfect pitching in all my life as he did that day.
He didn't have such terrible speed, did he?
Well, he was pretty fast.
He was?
Oh, yes. He wasn't nothing like Johnson or Waddell or a pitcher like that, or Cy Young. But he had good speed. He was fast. But old Cy Young, sorry.
A pretty good story about Cy Young coming up too. But, you know, one thing and this was why this is one of my favorite interviews of the book. Jones has just excellent recollection, and what he says about Mathewson is kind of echoed by every player that talks about him. You know, he's got teammates, obviously, in the book. Marquardt is one. But, you know, all of them have high praise for Matt. He was very, again, socially refined and very well educated. The one thing, and Jones didn't mention it because obviously he didn't have as close a relationship with Matty as some of his teammates would. But also, and again, I digress. Merkel and Fred Snodgrass were also interviewed for this book as well, and all of them, you know, or both of them said the same thing about Mathewson. The one thing that comes up, his gambling, his love of gambling, his prowess at gambling, and the fact that he was kind of aloof and hard to get to know, which I guess would fit the narrative that he was more of a higher social class than the average ball player, for lack of better words. But yeah, again, everyone says pretty much the same thing about Christy Mathewson, so that's cool too. But let's listen to his Cy Young story.
No, that story about Cy, I was always bunting on him because he was a rotten fielder.
Oh, yeah.
And a big clumsy guy, you know, and I'd have been crazy, bunny on one side and on the other. They never knew what to do. You know, I would lead off this game, and bing, and I hit it backhand and hit him on the ankle. And the ball bounced out in left field. Well, side jumped and he grabbed his foot, you know, and he whirled around 2 or 3 times on one leg. And, oh, God, I run down first base laughing my head off on it.
Of all these pitchers that you saw, which one is the best pitcher that you
Oh, I think Johnson.
No doubt about it.
Oh, there's no question about it. And I hit against most all of these good pitchers too. Walsh and Joss, Vic Willis. Boy, he had the biggest curveball I ever saw.
Are there any pitchers at all around today that can compare with those pitchers?
Well, I would say that Kopech would compare pretty well with Rube. But Rube, boy, he was a big, powerful guy. Boy, he had that ball like that big around on it too. But you know, the funny thing, he couldn't beat the Detroit team with all that stuff.
So interesting comparison there, and he's not the only person that they interview. And the name I forget is the other one, who really criticizes Cy Young's fielding. Which, you know, if you look at him, and he was, you know, he started pitching, I believe, in 1890. Just if I'm right off the top of my head, but he pitched, started pitching. I'm pretty sure 1890 was his first full year. Might even been prior to that, but 1890 just stands out. So he was a bigger man, not in the best of shape. So it was common that he was really not a good fielder. And the other player that talks about him talked about how they used to bunt. But interesting comparison between Waddell and Koufax. Waddell, generally regarded as having the finest curveball, and he's going to talk about Rube too coming up too. In a pretty funny story. But Waddell, the finest curveball of his time, and some people say one of the best in the game, and obviously Koufax was known for his stuff as well, including a knee-bending curveball. So a very apt comparison, and one that's been made quite a bit. And again, it shows how sharp Davy Jones was, not only in terms of recollection but understanding of the game, which is cool too.
This was 1907. They sent Rube ahead to Detroit to rest up. Rube was registered at the hotel, but nobody knew where he was. They couldn't find him. He wasn't in his room, and they didn't know where he was. Well, about 10 o'clock in the morning, there was a guy came in from Orchard Lake and told Connie Mack that they thought that Rube was out there fishing. Connie hired a car, so they went out to Orchard Lake, inquired out there, and they finally saw a boat out in the middle of the lake. It was anchored out there, but apparently nobody in it. So they thought, well, gosh, maybe he's in that boat out there. So they took a chance. They got another boat, and they rowed out there, and sure enough, here Rube was stretched out in the bottom of the boat, sound asleep, an empty bottle of whiskey and a little string of fish. This was about 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. The sun beating down on him, and here he was sound asleep, they said, in that boat. They finally got him, and they brought him in, and he pitched a corking game. We were going to beat him. Donovan beat him 2-1. Yeah, we had a tough time beating him.
How good a pitcher was Rube?
Oh, boy, he had the stuff. Gee, Whittaker. Boy, he could burn him through there.
As fast as Walter Johnson?
Right? No, I don't think so. No, I don't think he was quite as fast as Walter. Still, Rube had an awful lot of speed. He had a better curveball, a sharper curveball than Johnson did. Yeah, Johnson was more of a bender.
But the best you saw was Walter Johnson.
Oh, there's no question about it. As a matter of fact, I was the first big league player he pitched to. I almost was the leadoff.
Yes.
That was my specialty.
So you were the first big league player Walter Johnson ever faced.
Yeah.
What did you think of that fastball coming in? Did he strike you out?
No, I hit a ball like just down to the shortstop, and they threw me out. Although I never did have too much trouble with Johnson. No, Walter was a grand fella, one of the nicest guys I ever met.
Did you ever see Willie Keeler play?
Keeler? Oh, a lot of time.
Did you?
Yeah.
Was he as good as they say he is?
Oh, yeah, a corking player. little fella.
Yeah.
And he'd chop up, he'd hit this way. He wouldn't hit a ball. They don't suppose he ever made a home run in his life, but he could hit him where they ate, as he used to say.
Yeah.
I hit him where they ate.
Where would you put Willie Mays among the great outfielders?
Well, Willie Mays, of course, is a great outfielder. He's a great bowler. There's no question.
Would you really rank him up?
I would rank him with Speaker. With a competitive player, I'd pick Hal Chase.
Not Ty Cobb?
No.
No, that surprises me. Hal Chase?
No.
So we're two things. One, very interesting what he says about Hal Chase, who to me is one of the most despicable characters in the history of the game. I actually did a vlog on him a couple of years ago, which you can see in the video or listen to, I guess, in the video sections of this in my vlogs playlist. But let's just quickly fact check: was Davy Jones the first batter that Walter Johnson faced? Pretty much an easy one to fact check. And after he was 100% on target with the Germany Schaefer story, let's hope that he doesn't miss something. Well, there you go. So again, looking like Davy Jones is definitely a reliable source of fact from the dead ball era. Detroit Tigers versus Washington Senators. Johnson's first game, a 3-2 Tigers win. I hate those pop-ups. And Davy Jones leadoff. Johnson came up 5 times against Walter, walked once and struck out once. Johnson went 8 innings in that game, walked 1, only struck out 3. Surprisingly enough, gave up a home run, but. So once again, Davy Jones coming through with the facts. So he's going to talk about Hal Chase, and he does definitely reference that Hal Chase was a crooked son of a bitch, and basically, I mean, he's a stain on the game. Quite honestly, that's a nice way to put it. But he did get a lot of credit as a baseball player. Lauded as a defensive first baseman, probably comparative to, like say, the Keith Hernandez of his time. And in fact, Babe Ruth, who played a good portion of his career with a pretty solid first baseman named Lou Gehrig, ranked Chase ahead of Gehrig on his on Babe Ruth's all-time list. So let's see what Davey has to say about Hal Chase.
Was he a great first baseman, as they say?
He was better than this. He was the greatest competitor I ever saw. It's a funny thing. I made that statement to newspapermen, and it read it, and of course a lot of them.
And also a good Ty Cobb antidote in this story,
too. And you played against Wagner, and you played against all of these fellas, and you've seen all of them play. Well, why would you pick Chase? Well, for this reason, that guy could make plays on that infield that nobody else could even come close making. He would bounce around that infield like a rubber ball. When he played first base, he'd play right field and beat you to the first base. When the first time we saw Chase, he just joined the Yankees, and Cobb hit a ball down along the foul line, back of first. Chase went over and he grabbed it and back to first, and he beat Cobb to the bag. Cobb came back to the bench, and he was almost crying. He stole this base hit away from him. He said, lucky kid, have you ever seen such a lucky guy? God, the guy wouldn't make a play like that in 1,000 years again. He said, and they have to make it against me. He started crying, The next time he came up, Bush was on first, and Cobb hit a ball down to his right, when it started out into right field. Chase goes out there and he grabs that and down to second and back to first, and he had a double play on it. Cobb was fit to be tied. He was stealing 2 base hits in one game, holding that way. Cobb came on, he was sitting in the bench. He's sitting there with his head down, and finally he raised his head, he says, I don't think that guy is lucky. I think he's a damn good ball player. And I used to try to pull Bunsen, you just couldn't pull anything on the guy. He would just outguess you all the time.
That's a funny thing, because there's always been this question about Chase's honesty.
Yeah. He was crooked as hell.
And yet
That was the main thing against him. That's the reason that everybody was down on him. He was sent from the Yankee team on that account because he was cheating the players and he cheated cards and dice. He had loaded dice and he'd do anything. Oh, he's just a crook. He was mixed up in that Black Sox deal.
Yeah.
He would take money to throw games when he was with Cincinnati. Chase died a miserable life too. And I felt sorry for the guy. It's too bad, that a guy, a great ball player, well, even Cobb, Cobb could have been an awfully popular fellow. But boy, everybody despised him. His personality was rotten. Cobb was looking out for himself. And one year, we started out, I don't remember what year it was, 1910 or 11. Both Crawford and I was hitting like fools, starting off in the spring of the year, and he was in a slump. He wouldn't talk to either one of us because we were hitting and getting in the limelight, and getting the publicity, and he wasn't getting it, and he wouldn't talk to either one of us, either on or off the field. Playing by the side of two fellows like Cobb and Crawford, you're a good deal like a member of the chorus in a grand opera where there's two prima donnas.
Yes.
They get in the limelight, you see, and they get the publicity and so forth. But everybody's been good to me, and I've had everything that I wanted, and I've enjoyed life. And baseball, of course, gave me the help when I needed it. Independently wealthy, I've got everything. I'll never be able to spend the money that I got. I lost a lot. I lost pretty $1 million during that crash in 29 or 30. Oh God, I pretty went to the bottom. But I've lived a very wonderful life.
So just in that last bit, very, I love the Chase story. Cobb, two of the, well, I wouldn't even say Chase was despised. Chase had a way to charm people that allowed him to do a lot of what he did, and he got out. I mean, if Cobb was the type of immoral person that Chase was in terms of cheating and whatnot, and throwing games, he would have been out of baseball probably by 1910. Chase was able to just had a knack to charm people, and which I talk about in my vlog I did on him a couple of years ago, like I said. But yeah, just very ironic that the heartburn that Cobb had for Chase, taking away a couple of base hits, and that last story about Cobb not talking to Crawford and Jones when they were outperforming him to begin the season, and very, very much on point and on brand for Ty Cobb. It's unfortunate that he was that way, and who knows again how much of what happened between his, or what happened to his father at the hands of his mother affected him. I have to imagine that, that can't have, well, it obviously has no positive effect, but I can see how it can take you to a very dark place. But, again, you're still responsible for your own actions, and when you act that way pretty much your entire life, then it's more on you. But that's it. Davy Jones, again, to me, one of the my favorite interviews in this book. Just a treasure trove of information, and again, we fact checked him on a couple of things, 100% spot on. So just really great to be able to hear and be able to trust, the words of someone who actually lived those moments and lived and played in that time to, recollect. And man, big thanks to Lawrence Ritter for preserving this to the point where it could be made into an audiobook, so that basically it's going to be timeless, and future generations of baseball fans can enjoy their recounts. So hopefully you like this. It was fun doing it. I would probably think I'm going to do one or two more of these. So if you want to hear more of this, leave a comment, and I'll definitely be happy to do more. I can sit and reminisce. Well, reminisce probably a bad word since I was not alive in the Deadball era, but discuss and break down the Deadball era. It's definitely my favorite time period in baseball, and the more I can never get enough information from that time period. So anyway, appreciate you checking this out. Hit that thumbs up if you like it, and again, leave a comment if you'd like to hear more of this type of thing. And Glory Their Times, you can get it on iTunes, the audio book. Just a treasure trove of stories and a fun listen. Like I said, I listen to it religiously once a year, always in the week or few days before Christmas. I put it on and listen to it all day while I work. So I hope you'll have a great day. And a reminder, Boxing Day, December 26th, our giveaway. We're giving away PDF Glory Days Boxing with 1,100 fighters, all 1,100 fighters, and also going to be giving away a PDF of Glory Days College Football with the base set, which is 30 all-time great teams, and an added bonus, they are not even available for purchase yet. 75 teams from the 2021 season, including all Power 5 teams. So that's going to be, again, Boxing Day, and I do have an appointment that day. I need to verify when. So it'll be around that, but I will post a reminder with the exact time so you can check that out. Appreciate everyone that has entered. I think we've got over 50 entries so far, so good response to that. But I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Safe New Year, and enjoy the time however you choose to celebrate it. Anthony with Bleacher Bums Gaming, thanks for checking this out, and we'll talk to you later.